Hey everyone, welcome to Clickheads. I'm Eddie the Chump, and today we're going to talk about possibly the best operator player in the world, and that's TSM's Wardell. Wardell and his TSM teammates have been in the news lately as they just won the first Ignition event series in North America, beating out Skadoodle, Brax and AZK's team T1 in the final. Wardell has received a lot of praise for his op play, and as a fan of the weapon myself, I have been frequenting his streams since the beginning of the beta to try and pick up some tips. I strongly recommend you go watch him if you're looking for ways to get better with the op. He is outrageously talented, and his stream and social media are all in the description box below. As for this video, let's start off with the basics. Shot types. So in this first section, we're going to quickly talk about all the different methods of hitting shots that Wardell most commonly uses. In this first clip, we're going to watch him hit 2 drag scopes. This is where you scope in and adjust your aim in a dragging fashion across the target and time when you press fire. This technique is one of the core skills a good op player must develop, as crosshair placement will not always have you directly on an enemy when you scope in. It's quite different to how a rifler would aim, by the way, as to be the most efficient, you'll want to aim for center of mass. You only have to hit 1 shot to the body, so this is where you should be aiming at, for the center of the chest where the model is the largest. If you look at where he pressed fire on both the Phoenix and the Omen, despite how the enemy might be moving, Wardell tries to hit them where the hitbox is the biggest. This is really core to op play and something you should be conditioning yourself to prioritize, and it carries over to all the other shot types that we're going to be talking about. Moving on, we have the quick scope. Now CS fans might disagree with the terminology, but this is where you place your hipfire reticle on a target and very quickly scope in and fire in one fluid motion. This kill on the Jet is a good example of how this shot type should be used. Usually this is done when you don't have the time to prepare your crosshair placement, perhaps surprised by an enemy position or they move in an unexpected way. Doing this should not be the core of your aiming style, and it isn't for Wardell actually. One good thing is Valorant allows op players to have a hipfire reticle, making these quick lineups easier than they were in CS, which doesn't have any reticle for the AWP when not scoped in. This next clip shows Wardell flicking to a target well outside the center of his screen. Fundamentally, you don't want to be relying on this technique either, as it's one of the hardest to master and takes real practice. Wardell works on his aim all the time in between matches on stream with AimLab, and to be good at flicking is where you'll have to develop and rely on muscle memory with dedicated practice. The last shot type we're going to cover is the genuine no-scope. This outrageous shot Wardell hits on this jumping raise shows the kinds of context it should be used in, extreme close range and when any other shot would just take too long to execute. Let's be clear, when no-scoping, the bullet doesn't go straight a lot of the time, so the bigger the target is on your screen, or how close they are, the more chance you have of hitting the shot. If we slow down this no-scope on the raise, you can see that Wardell actually drags his reticle across the path of Raze's movement in the air. If you try and use a no-scope on a moving target, doing this is very advisable. It's no guarantee, obviously, and no-scopes are, by their nature, a last resort, but give yourself the best chances possible by aiming to have the center of your screen on the enemy when you press fire. Playstyles. So moving on, there are various ways of playing with an op that require different skill sets. In this first section, I'm going to talk about the place your crosshair and wait or post-up style. This is the most basic and the one that many players first attempt when picking up a sniper. Place your aim in an area where you think a player might move into and wait for them to do so, then shoot. In this first clip, Wardell gets info from his Raze bot that there is an enemy round this corner of A connector. Now he places his reticle very deliberately away from the actual wall, and this is something I want to dive into. Many beginners place their aim incorrectly in this scenario, usually giving themselves no room to react to a peek by placing the scope way too close to the wall. If we look at how Wardell does this, he's giving himself very roughly the width of one agent's hitbox, as if someone peeks him specifically, this is where they will have to be to shoot him. This calculation differs across all terrain. The further away you are, the smaller that one agent gap will be, etc. It's also a question of, will the enemy peek me as the op player, or will they try and wide swing a corner? If you think a player is going to peek you, then this amount of space from a surface is fine as a general rule of thumb. But if you think they might try and cross wide, then this might be a little tight if you're not as good as Wardell is, which is virtually everybody. How much gap you leave for a player to move into is also a factor of how quick you are to react. Peeker's advantage can be savage in Valorant, and Wardell is an S-tier player, so he doesn't need as much room to react as say a lesser skilled player might, so you'll have to adjust how much room you leave for a peek based on experience. In this clip on Ascent mid, Wardell places his aim above this box, which depending on your level of play, you might never see people peek this in the way the Reyna does, but around Radiant level, players are always trying to juke each other with better movement than straight peeking out into the open of a very infamous on angle. The reason Wardell places his aim above the box is because there's many ways for an attacker to peek this. You can actually boost on the box from the attacker's side, jump strafe out, or wide swing. So by placing his aim where he did, he gave himself the best chance of adjusting to whichever peek actually happened. This is true of every on angle in the game, and experience will dictate to you how to best cover your options. Scoped in peeking. By far the most important detail of Wardell's op play is how he actually takes peeks himself. Wardell plays scoped in far more often than you might imagine, even when moving around and checking corners. This is something beginner op users are afraid to do because if done incorrectly, it can leave you extraordinarily vulnerable. But I want you to watch this clip on split attack. Notice how carefully Wardell checks angles he thinks players might be while scoped in, only unscoping to make much larger movements in between his actual peaks. Notice his movement as well. He is not full strafing while scoped. He is moving in short, sharp bursts with incredible discipline as to not expose himself where he doesn't need to. When he peeks into an angle he thinks a player could be, he also crouches quite often to make his hitbox smaller and avoid being headshot at a regular height. Now because he was so methodical and careful, when he actually does locate this raise, his scope is already placed so well, the actual shot he has to hit is not that difficult. But it's made easy by all his other skills. If you find yourself dying while scoped in trying to peek, it's probably because you're moving way too far, way too quickly. Wardell moves in a very staccato way, and if there's one thing a lot of players find incredibly difficult, it's the control necessary to play this way. For instance, check out this next clip. Wardell expects players coming out of double doors. He gets fully flashed by the breach. A lot of players would panic here, but he doesn't. When the blind fades, he's still scoped in and he's moving to the right of the boxes in front of him. Now this is very important. He knows players will likely be trying to cross site. Also, they probably did not see him behind the site as he fell off. So when outnumbered and in a place where you're vulnerable from more than one direction, make a decision and try and make a play. Here, escape wasn't really an option. If he tried to fall back to CT, he would have died as they crossed. So instead, he played to make something happen. He peeks out with great crosshair placement and catches the jet trying to cross to long. His teammate flashes as he continues his peek and he kills the fully blinded breach. Notice how in between shots he's not moved so far that the breach could see him and kill him while he's chambering the next round. Aggressive play doesn't mean being hasty and lax. If anything, being aggressive requires more discipline than passive play, oddly enough, and Wardell is really good at this. This next clip is outrageous and shows perfectly how Wardell never panics. He's trying to take a peek on A long of Haven. He gets flashed and falls away. He checks his Cypher cam to check for a push and notices his teammate dies on sight from short. So he falls back and pre-aims where an attacker might be crossing. They haven't come out yet, so he methodically checks the short angle, then goes looking for the player scoped in the entire time. He is not unduly hasty, and as he rounds the corner, his crosshair placement allows him to kill the brim pretty easily. Now, a smoke has come down on the entrance to site, and he has two options, fall back or play around the smoke. He checks his cam, sees two players long and very close, and decides presumably he doesn't have time to fall away, so instead he goes into the smoke while trying to dodge a flash. Once in the smoke, he plays for audio cues and even spots the jet's very faint outline. Because he's so close, he decides to no-scope her. Bike down. Now, because the jet was behind the breach on his cam, he probably believes the breach has already crossed out. So he plays the edge and exits the smoke at the back corner while scoping in. He plays this smoke edge masterfully and carefully peeks while scoped to try and find the breach. He sees the breach trying to find him, and because his fundamentals are so good with the placement of his aim while peeking and his short, sharp movement skills, he kills him as well relatively easily. He then checks short again just in case another player is there, but they are in fact not. Most of what he did in this clip is built upon fundamentals that you yourself can learn in practice. It looks flashy, but it's actually incredibly disciplined. Never moving more than he needs to, always being prepared, pre-aiming the right spots, etc. You can learn to do that. Outside of the no-scope, were the shots that he hit difficult, or did they require insane mechanical feats? No, not really. 80% of Wardell's skill is attainable with very hard work. The rest is obviously his outrageous natural talent, but if I could be 80% as good as Wardell, I'd be very happy. Strafe jump peeking. Now next up, I am going to talk about something that is way more advanced that you really only see the best op players do reliably, and that's taking advantage of the instant falling and jumping accuracy recovery. In Valorant and CSGO for that matter, if you jump or fall from a surface, you're not accurate while mid-air. Everybody knows that. What only elite players do often though is take advantage of how quickly you can recover from that falling or jumping state. In this first clip, Wardell actually uses this to his advantage quite creatively. He uses the box next to A connector on Haven to fall as he peeks left. The reason is, mid-air targets are simply harder to hit in the head. The Raze he kills is probably expecting a traditional peek, which at this level she might be very ready for with good crosshair placement. But Wardell subverts that by using his falling state to throw her off and fires as soon as he can as he lands. This is advanced stuff. You can try it in the training room for yourself to get the timing as to when you can shoot accurately after falling or jumping, but it will take a bit to get used to. In this clip on Ascent, Wardell jump peeks Cat. There isn't anyone there yet and he jumps down into mid. Watch how quickly he fires after landing on this poor Brim. Not only is he getting better cover, but he's making himself so hard to hit while moving like this. Even if the smoke wasn't there, the shot Brim would have to hit to kill him would be very difficult. All of this doesn't mean jump peek everything, but it does mean you need to be aware of places it can benefit you, especially if you think an enemy might be expecting you and pre-aiming well. It won't always work, but the better you get at it, the more viable it becomes. Now, just to summarize everything we've talked about this far, I want to show you this clip which has nearly everything wrapped up in one neat place. We begin here in CT of B-site on Bind. As Wardell approaches, he scopes in on the window as he becomes visible. Now he places and waits for a target. Look at where he's aiming, right on the window ledge, but giving roughly a character's amount of space for them to walk into. Phoenix does walk into his scope and he kills him. He then kills the Raze bot. When he decides to enter site after throwing a slow orb, he isn't actually prepared for this jet at all. This is because his breach is hiding on site and his jet has just died from Octagon, so he doesn't have the info. But a player of Wardell's skill level can pull off a rapid quickscope like this, and will have to from time to time, which is why it's important to practice. After killing the jet, he then scopes in and peeks carefully looking for the Reyna. Like a lot of Wardell's play, the fundamentals carry him through, with the mechanically demanding highlights being just that. Sometimes he has to pull something outrageous out of the bag occasionally, but it's not the baseline of his play. If you try to do that and hit low percentage shots all of the time, guess what happens? You have a low percentage success rate. For the last clip in this guide, I wanted to show you just how dominant a player as good as Wardell can be. This is a high level game with other pros such as Hiko and Jason R on his team. These are not bots he's playing against either, but he makes them look that way a little bit. We begin on defense of Split in B Heaven peeking mid. Now this is a common op spot and his opponents are trying to hit the spam lineup on him through the boxes. They know he's probably there and are not peeking him, very wisely so. Now mid on Split is double-sided and Wardell has enough experience to know that with his opponent spamming him, there might be a player trying to creep up on him from the opposite side. So he takes a risk by peeking out wider and sure enough, hi Brim, bye Brim. Yes, this was a little bit risky, but there's a reason Jet is a good agent for op players. You can play more like this more often and you have escape options with her dash. Wardell actually jiggles the angle while cycling the bolt to try and make his opponents commit to trying to trade him out, and when he re-peeks, there are two opponents out in the open. He kills one and immediately dashes away to avoid the trade. With Hiko's Raze now supporting him, he peeks again, but the opponents are onto this and jiggle peek him in return, forcing him to miss very narrowly. They pop Raze ult, so Wardell and Hiko fall off very rapidly. With that kind of ult investment, it is likely the opponents are committed behind it. So he pre-aims his own smoke to try and deny them space, but they have also Cypher caged the cross in return at the bottom of the stairs. This means they might be crossing to ropes, and Wardell moves to pre-aim the edge of the cage just in case they try and sneak through, and he backs up into the corner and waits. They haven't gone ropes yet, which means they're probably going to try and peek him with multiple players at once to try and trade him. Now watch what he does here. He pre-aims to the left as he reasons they probably did cross, at least to outside ropes, and he can catch them as they cross back while not exposing himself to multiple angles just in case one player or two were still the opposite side of this entrance. Look at how much he moves, precisely the right amount. down. He's not being hasty, he's controlled, giving himself the best chances of both hitting shots and staying alive. They do try and peek him in numbers, but the Cypher is a little bit late, which actually saves him from getting triple collateraled. After hitting this shot, he returns to cover to cycle the bolt and then re-peeks the lone Cypher. And that's an ace, easy money, we do this. Again, I sound like a broken record, but you can learn most of the great things Wardell does, and that will be enough to make you a much better op player. The last 20 to 10% comes down to how prepared you are to work extremely hard and how much natural talent you're blessed with or not. I love watching Wardell to try and learn, and I'd just like to say here at the end, if you enjoyed this video, then you really owe it to him to check out his stream and YouTube, both of which are linked in the description. And that's about it for today. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you like the content on this channel, please hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you get notified when we upload. Also, please check out our Facebook stream. We're no-lifing Valorant over there, and it would be great to see some of you in the chat. Until next time!